After a hard storm on the Makhari plain, a grieving lioness takes in a lost warthog piglet. Amani, a rookie ranger, is torn. Document a miracle or enforce the natural order by pulling them apart. As rogue drones buzz, snares glint, and hyenas press in, his choice is stark. Turn this wonder into loud content or protect it with the quiet courage of leaving it be. Dawn came softly to the Makhari Conservancy, a thin ribbon of light sliding over the acacia crowns and laying a quiet glaze on the wet grass. Amani Njoroge eased his patrol truck onto a sandy track and cut the engine. The storm in the night had been loud and long, and now the land felt tender, as if every leaf remembered the weight of rain. He raised his binoculars and found her where the copia met the plain, a lone lioness, still as a carved figure against the sunlit rock. Naledi's coat, darkened by dew, shone in patches. Beside her, the shallow scrape of a den was no longer a secret place, but an empty dish. Amani had seen dens before. He had learned to count the soft paw prints, to read the lines in the dust, but this one told a different story. The wind lifted a faint, milk-sour scent and carried it away. Naledi lowered her head and breathed into the hollow as if a voice might answer from the darkness. Amani pressed the radio's push to talk, then stopped. There was nothing to report that would help anyone, only a private ache he felt was not his to announce. He stepped down, boots sinking in the softened earth, and kept a respectful distance. Naledi turned an ear toward him, but did not rise. Her eyes, the color of old amber, moved over the plain and back to the den, as if tracing a path lost in the night. From the thorn thicket came a small, uneven rustle. Amani held still. A warthog piglet no bigger than a house cat tottered into the open, a scrap of bristle and courage with knees still learning the ground. It paused at the sight of the lioness, sides fluttering, then, against every lesson the bush ever taught, walked toward her. Amani felt his breath catch. He had seen fear drive animals in wild, wrong directions, but this was different. The piglet was not fleeing. It was seeking. Naledi did not lash her tail or show her teeth. She shifted, slow and deliberate, making a small shelter of her body. The piglet pressed its cheek to her foreleg, trembling, and Naledi lowered her head, touching it with the soft, careful push a mother uses when words would be too loud. Somewhere above them, a hornbill called into the clean morning air. Amani lifted his camera, then lowered it again. Some moments felt like prayers, and prayers were not to be rushed. He watched the odd pair breathe in the same rhythm, the plain holding its silence around them like a promise yet to be tested. Amani held his place in the grass until the breeze shifted and the lioness flicked an ear. Naledi's ribs rose and fell with a steady, patient breath, the kind a tired mother uses to quiet a nervous room. The piglet, small enough to vanish behind a tuft of grass, tilted its head and stepped closer. Instinct said the scene should break apart with a chase, a cry, a sudden end. Instead, the morning kept its balance. The radio at Amani's shoulder gave a soft crackle. He pressed the button halfway and heard Sergeant Wafula's clipped voice cycling through check-ins. "Patrol 3, status." Amani swallowed and answered. "Patrol 3, all quiet. Storm damage only." He let go of the button and felt the small lie settle in his chest. It wasn't danger he was hiding. It was a question. And he didn't yet have the answer. Naledi lowered her head until her whiskers brushed the piglet's back. With slow strokes of her tongue, she cleaned the mud from its face, the way lions do when they want to keep a little one calm and warm. Toto, that was the name that rose in Amani's mind, closed its eyes as if tucking into a memory. The lioness shifted her weight, making a pocket of shade against her belly. The piglet hesitated, then nuzzled forward, small hooves kneading the dust. Amani felt his pulse in his throat. It was a tender motion, not a trespass, and it told a story older than rules. He lifted his camera, hand steady now. The lens drew a circle around the impossible, predator and prey folded into a single, quiet purpose. He framed it wide to include the den, then tight on the rough gold of Naledi's coat, the soft bristles on Toto's neck. He recorded, then lowered the camera and simply watched. Some proofs, he thought, deserve the courtesy of silence. The radio crackled again. "Reminder to all units," Wahaso said. "No interference with wildlife behavior. Report anomalies to base." Amani glanced at the glassy eye of the lens and clicked it off. He wasn't changing the land. He was refusing to break it. Overhead, a hornbill crossed the sky with a lazy flap, and the day warmed from silver to pale gold. Naledi rested her chin on her paws, eyes half-lidded, as the piglet settled in the safe curve of her body. Amani stood at last, brushing dew from his knees, and backed away. The line between instinct and mercy had moved, and he had witnessed it. By late morning, the plane had traded its cool silver for a soft, forgiving gold. Amani walked the edge of the copia, careful to leave no hard prints, and noted the small lessons passing between the unlikely pair. Naledi angled her body to block the wind, and the piglet, Toto, the name now felt right, learned to stand in her lee. When she rose to move, Toto followed the direction of her whiskers, stopping when she paused, starting when she did, as if some invisible thread tied their steps together. Amani filmed in short, patient breaths. Wide shots to show the den and the slope of the land. Gentle close-ups for the language of touch most people would miss at a glance. He kept the metadata scrubbed. No coordinates, no timestamp that could give away a pattern. In his notebook, he wrote only, "Behavior consistent with grief, soothing," and closed the cover. At noon, the field clinic truck rattled up the back track, dust hanging like lace in its wake. Dr. Thandi Ndlovu climbed down with a soft cooler and a thermos, her sun hat tipped low. "You sounded careful on the radio," she said, handing him water. Amani cued a short clip on his camera and passed it over. Thandi watched in silence, one hand closing around the strap of her bag. "If this gets out," she murmured, "we'll have thrill seekers, influencers, and worse. Keep it quiet. Promise me." He nodded. "I already did." A buzz threaded the warm air. Thandi tilted her head. "Hear that?" Amani did. Thin, high, mechanical. He scanned the sky and found a small quadcopter slipping out from the glare, no markings he could see. It hovered, tilted, and drifted toward the copia. "Not ours," he said, pulse ticking up. He slipped his camera into its pouch and tapped his radio. "Base, Patrol 3, possible unauthorized drone north of Marker Delta." Static answered, then Wafula's voice. "Maintain distance. Observe and report. Do not engage." Naledi lifted her head, ears forward. Toto pressed close to her chest, a quiver running along its side. The drone hung a moment longer, then slid away, following the faint ribbon of a game path. Amani exhaled slowly. "They're fishing for a location," Thandi said. "Let's make sure they don't catch one." They sat in the shade of the truck and watched the light turn mellow. Naledi lay back down, gathering Toto in the curve of her forelegs. Amani capped his pen and closed his notebook. The pact, he thought, was simple. Protect what you love without turning it into a spectacle. He could keep that promise. Could the rest of the world? By the next morning, the radio traffic had turned brisk, like weather tightening before a storm. Amani signed in at the outpost, dust still on his sleeves, and found Sergeant Wafula at the map table with a clipboard and a cup of black tea gone cool. "We've had calls," Wafula said without greeting. "Someone posted a blurry clip, Lioness with something small tucked against her. Tourists are sniffing around. I want your card and a written report before noon." Amani kept his voice even. "I've logged storm damage and routine spoor. Nothing actionable." Wafula tapped the clipboard. "Actionable is my word to decide. There's chatter about abnormal behavior. If it's a risk to visitors or to other species, we separate the animals. Policy is clear." The word separate felt like a stone in Amani's mouth. He slid his camera across the table without meeting Wafula's eyes. "I'll file the report," he said, and stepped back into the white wash of midday heat. On the plain, Naledi and Toto moved in the slow rhythm of safety, learned one step at a time. They skirted a chain of shallow pans left by the storm. Dragonflies stitched the air with blue threads. Naledi paused at a low reed-choked pool and lifted her head, tasting the wind. Amani lifted his binoculars and saw the reason. Two crocodiles like mossy logs, only the lidless eyes admitting to life. Naledi circled wide, her body a shield that made a narrow lane through the grass. Toto followed, hooves careful, learning a map he would never have been given if nature had kept to its usual script. A distant voice, too bright for the hour, cut across the quiet. Amani turned to see a rental 4x4 ease to a stop where the track widened. A young man in a sun hat stepped out with a smile and a gimbal calling, "Hey folks, Leo Park here, chasing a once-in-a-lifetime sighting." His camera woman swung her lens toward the kopje. Amani's stomach dipped. He walked up with his badge in plain view. "This section is closed after the storm," he said. "Soft ground. Please return to the main loop." Leo's smile held. "Officer, we've got a huge audience waiting. If there's a special situation, we can blur locations. Think of the awareness we could raise." Amani shook his head. "Awareness begins with distance." The gimbal lowered, but not much. Overhead, a small drone slid out of the glare like a curious bird. Amani felt the heat thicken behind his collar. He thumbed the radio. "Base Patrol 3, media presence at Delta Spur, possible drone." Wafula answered at once. "Do not engage. Collect plates, report and return. And Njoroge, bring that report." Amani looked back to the plain. Naledi had already taken Toto farther from the water, her tail a calm metronome. The map on the wall at the outpost said order. The living map before him said care. Somewhere between those two he would have to stand. Night came without a moon, a soft fold of darkness that gathered the plain into itself. Amani parked the truck well back from the kopje and went the last stretch on foot, feeling for the path with careful steps. He cupped a hand over his flashlight, then thought better of it and slipped the batteries into his pocket. The heavens were thick with stars. The ground needed no glare, only patience. He found Naledi by sound first, a low, steady rumble that wasn't quite a growl, more the quiet engine of a watchful heart. She stood broadside to the breeze, making a windbreak with her body. Toto tucked tight between her forelegs, small ribs fluttering, head lifting now and then as if counting the beats of her breath. The air had that cool, clean taste the land wears after storms, layered with the honest scents of grass and dust. Amani sank to a knee and let his eyes adjust. The plain became a slow reveal. Clumps of thatch, the dark seam of a game trail. And there, two pale coins of reflected light sliding low and silent. Then two more, linings of laughter, thin and eager, scratched at the edges of the dark. Hyenas fanning out from downwind, patient and practical. Amani felt the old lesson. Rise in him, stay still, stay small, stay calm. Naledi lowered her head until her whiskers brushed Toto's back. The piglet went still, trusting the shape of her. When the nearest hyena stepped too close, Naledi's rumble deepened. Not a challenge, not yet, but a line drawn as clear as a fence. The sound traveled through the grass and through Amani himself, a reminder that courage can be quiet and still be heard. He shifted his weight and felt a tautness under his boot. He froze. A loop of cable lay half buried in the dust, its anchor staked into the hardpan and disguised with a scatter of chaff. A snare, illegal, patient, and unforgiving. Amani eased back, slow as a minute hand, and let the breath he'd been holding slip out in a thread. There was another lesson here. Danger doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it waits for a misstep. The hyenas tested the edge, restless, then wavered. Naledi's stance said, "Not tonight." One by one, the small lights drifted off, laughter fading into the tall grass. The plane exhaled. Toto nosed Naledi's chest, and she answered with a touch gentle as a nod. Amani stayed until the rhythm of the night settled again. He memorized the place of the hidden wire, the angle of the stake, the curl of the loop. There would be choices to make at first light. For now, the land had chosen calm, and he honored it by moving like a shadow back to the truck, the batteries still warm in his pocket. Dawn came pale and tender, lifting the hush from the plane. Amani parked at the service track and walked in with the first light, his mind tracing the place where the hidden snare lay. He found it exactly as he'd memorized it: wire loop, anchor stake, the careless scatter of chaff. He knelt, brushed the dust aside, and stared at the metal curve that could take a life without making a sound. The radio clicked at his shoulder. "Patrol 3, Sergeant Wafula said, voice dry as paper. "Reminder, report all anomalies. If risk is present, you will intervene according to policy. Do not remove evidence. Acknowledge." Amani pressed the button. "Patrol 3 copies," he said, and let the radio settle back. Gravel crunched behind him. Dr. Thandi's truck rolled to a stop, its engine soft as a contented sigh. She stepped out with her canvas bag, eyes moving from Amani to the ground. "You found one," she said. He nodded. She reached into her bag and produced a small pair of bolt cutters wrapped in cloth. "I don't carry these to decorate the glove box," she added, voice low. "If you use them, it will be because you decided to keep something whole." Amani took the cutters. The weight felt honest in his hands. He looked toward the copia. Naledi and Toto were at the margin of shadow, the lioness lifting her head now and then to taste the air. The piglet stayed close, its small steps quick and earnest. The day seemed to lean in, waiting. He slid the cutters under the loop and closed his grip. Wire gave with a sharp, practical snap. He clipped the anchor free and coiled the metal into a harmless ring, tucking it into his pack. Then he opened his camera and wiped the location data from the last day's clips, leaving only time and weather. Some records were safer without a map. A whine rose in the distance, a familiar, thin note that made Thandi's head tip and Amani's shoulders tighten. A drone eased over the tree line, no emblem, just the tidy confidence of a tourist toy. Far off on the service road, a white rental slowed, and Amani recognized the cheerful stance of Leo Park, gimbal in hand, scanning the horizon. The radio crackled again. "Do not engage. Collect plates. Return to base," Wafula instructed. Amani scanned the sky, then the ground, then the pair on the plane. He spoke softly, mostly to himself. Awareness begins with distance. He shouldered his pack and stood. The snare was gone. The coordinates were gone. The day, for now, was safer. He would carry the rest, choice, risk, answer, back to the outpost. Heat shimmered above the grass by mid-afternoon, and the plane wore the hush of a held breath. Amani paced the downwind edge of the copia, keeping Naledi and Toto in sight without breaking their calm. The lioness moved with the easy purpose of a seasoned guardian. The piglet matched her stride in small, earnest steps, a shadow learning to be brave. A ripple ran through the grass from the far side, subtle as a whisper. Hyenas, 3 at first, then 5, fanned into a crescent, clever noses working the breeze. Amani flattened behind a clump of thatch and watched the line close. Naledi felt it too. She stopped, squared her shoulders, and drew Toto in against her chest. The steady hum in her throat deepened until it was less a sound than a promise spoken to the ground. Not one step more. The nearest hyena tested the air, stiff-legged and bold. Naledi did not rush. She simply grew larger, head low, tail out, paws set like stones, and met the intruder with a short, thunderless charge that bent the crescent back. Toto squealed once, high and bright, then went still again, pressed into the safe curve of her forelegs. Amani shifted to get a clearer view and felt the earth tug at his boot. He looked down. Another snare, new wire, new stake, lay camouflaged in a sprinkle of chaff. His heel had snagged the loop. He eased his weight back, breath locked in his chest. The squeal came again, not fear this time, but alarm, sharp enough to slice the moment. Amani froze, then inched free, lifting his boot clear with the care of a man diffusing his own heartbeat. "Thank you, little one," he whispered into the grass. A thin electric whine skimmed the air. The unmarked drone drifted in from the glare, wobbling slightly in the heat. It nosed lower, lens tilting toward the standoff. Above it, a hornbill cut across the sky, broad wings beating the thick afternoon air. The wash of that wing beat, or the thermal, lifting off the rocks, flicked the small machine off balance. It wavered, clipped a thorn branch, and spun down into the scrub with a startled whir. The hyenas, unsettled by the noise and Naledi's unblinking stance, lost their nerve and melted back into the taller grass. The plane exhaled. Naledi touched Toto's head with her chin, a mother's tally after a storm. Amani slipped toward the scrub. The drone lay on its side, rotor ticking. Taped beneath its belly was a thumb-sized transmitter, red diode, winking a steady beat. He cupped it in his palm and felt the pulse of coordinates, seeking a listener. He looked back to the lioness and her foundling, safe for the moment in the wide, bright silence. Mercy had turned back once today, on the plane, and in him. Morning found the plane rinsed clean, the light soft as linen laid out to dry. Amani drove to the outpost with the fallen drone in a canvas sack and the transmitter wrapped in cloth. He placed both on Sergeant Wafula's desk, along with a labeled coil of snare wire. Wafula studied the items without touching them, the muscle in his jaw working once, then still. "You were told not to engage," he said at last. "And yet, here we are." Amani met his eyes. "Sir, someone was engaging first." Dr. Thandi stepped from the corridor with a folder tucked to her chest. "I've prepared a memo," she said, voice even. "Observed behavior is consistent with grief, soothing, and cross-species bonding. Rare, but not unprecedented. Recommendation: internal archival status, restricted access, and immediate sweep of Delta Spur for illegal traps." Wafula lifted a brow. "Tourists are circling. Content makers smell a story." Thandi nodded. "Then we make the story smaller. We protect it by not feeding it." Amani slid a memory card across the table. "A cut for the record," he said. "No coordinates, no trail markers. Weather and time only. The quiet bits are intact." Wafula inserted the card, watched the first frames. Naledi's calm breath, Toto tucked in the crux of her forelegs, the plane listening. He watched longer than Amani expected, knuckles loosening on the edge of the desk. At noon, Wafula signed 2 orders. The first, Delta Spur, temporary closure, patrol increase, trap sweep. The second, footage, Internal archive restricted. He slid them to Thandi to countersign, then set his pen down like a small concession. "The land keeps enough hard choices," he said. "We needn't add careless ones." Amani returned to the plane with the sweep team. They walked the game paths in slow, responsible lines, lifting wire from dust, pulling stakes from hardpan, filling the scars with earth. The rumor of drones faded. The rental tracks thinned. Under the copia, Naledi rose and stretched, sunlight touching the old gold in her coat. Toto followed, sturdier now, stepping with a new certainty born of borrowed courage. When the work was done, Amani set his camera on the truck hood and let it roll without zoom or polish. Naledi paused at the edge of light, turned once as if counting, then moved on with Toto tucked against her shoulder. No music, no commentary, just breath and grass and the honest rasp of the world being itself. That evening, back at the outpost, Amani labeled the archive folder with a single line. Makhari, bond observed, do not publish. He closed the drawer and stood a moment in the door, watching the plane exhale into dusk. Some stories, he thought, are most true when they're kept small. He turned off the office light and stepped outside, where the first star was already waiting, and somewhere beyond the copia, a lioness and her foundling walked into a future they had chosen together. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Before you scroll away, tell me this. Do you believe a bond like theirs could really exist? If this story touched your heart, drop a 1 in the comments so I know you're still with me. And don't forget to subscribe, because the next story might just remind you that sometimes the wild loves us back in ways we'll never forget.